Hello YouTube, welcome to a graphic design tutorial, and in this tutorial we're going to be making the same button we made in Photoshop, about a week ago in Gimp. Now I'm going to be coming out with a new tutorial in a few days or so, but this is just the Gimp version of the tutorial. Now keep in mind I don't intend to make a Gimp version for every tutorial. This is just sort of a video that shows that the programs aren't that different after all. So with that said, let's go ahead and start the tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new image. The canvas size, of course, doesn't really matter because you're just going to be making a button, and I'm just using this as a background. And let's go ahead and make this background blue. And now, unfortunately, I'm still using two monitors, and every time I try to open up a window on Gimp, it opens up in the second monitor, and I have to drag it over. So if any of you know how to fix that, go ahead and let me know. So I'm just going to go ahead and set a linear gradient with a dark blue, and it's FG transparent, and basically I'm just using this to go ahead and get us a nice canvas to work on. So I'm going to make a new layer, and then I'm going to grab the square selection tool, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's on the normal selection mode, and then I'm going to check rounded corners, and I'm using a radius of about 18 for this size of an image. Now the radius will vary depending on the size of the image you have. So I'm going to make about like that, and then I will go ahead and select a nice lime green-ish color. So we're going to select right there, and we're going to select about like that. I think that'll be good, hopefully. So in Gimp you can go ahead and hold Control down to make a straight gradient line, and we are definitely still on FG to transparent. So we're going to go FG to BG, then hold Control and make a straight line down, and FG to BG. There we go. Finally got the right one. So now we can go ahead and go select None, and let's move this to the center of the image. I think it's right about here. Now we're going to right-click on the layer and click Alpha to Selection and make a new layer above that. Now I'm going to grab the Square Select tool again, and I'm going to make sure my selection mode is on Intersect or Bisect, and then I'm going to select the top half of the button, which is going to select half of the button. Now I'm going to grab the Gradient tool and select a white to transparent gradient, and then I'm going to go ahead and hold Control and stroke up like this. So at this point we can go ahead and go select None. Now what this is going to do is it's going to make a gloss on the button, and it's a little too intense, so I'm going to go ahead and tone it down. I think about like that's good. So then I'm going to go ahead and Alpha to Selection this again, so I guess we probably didn't have to go select None in the first place. And I'm going to grab a black foreground to transparent gradient, except I'm also going to set it on radial. So you can go ahead and set Control to get a perfect 45-degree angle. It doesn't really matter because it's a radial gradient, but it's good to see how long the circular gradients are going to be in comparison to ones you've made before. So I think that looks about sort of symmetrical. It doesn't need to be exact because we're going to go ahead and reduce the opacity on them. And we're going to reduce the opacity to about that. Now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer right here, and on the bottom layer I'm going to Alpha to Selection this again, and I'm going to fill it in with a much darker green color. So we can go ahead and choose a fairly dark green color like that. Then I'm going to make sure the selection mode's on on linear. And of course you could also be using the bucket fill tool for this. I just am in the habit of using the gradient tool. So I'm going to go ahead and move this layer down, and this will create a nice dark outline on the bottom of our button. And then we're going to go ahead and duplicate this layer again, right click and then click Alpha to Selection again. Then we're going to choose a light green. So I think for this example, this green would work fairly well. So I'm going to go ahead and color that in. Then we're going to go ahead and click Select None. Now I'm going to grab the Move tool, and I'm going to move up the top bar a little bit. So this, like the dark part, creates a nice light border for our button, which is also very good. And that'll look a lot better in a second. So now we have the main base for the background, for the button down, but I think I actually want it to have a little more depth yet. And I don't know if we did this in the last tutorial, but I'm doing it in this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and grab the main button layer, then click Alpha to Selection, and make a new layer on top of everything else yet. Then I'm going to grab the Paintbrush tool, select a black color, and select a fuzzy circle brush. And I'm just going to go ahead and get straight lines using this black brush, and you can do that by holding Shift. And they're not exactly straight lines, but that's okay because we're going to be blurring it in a second here too. So once we have that, we can go ahead and go Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we'll go ahead and Gaussian blur it by, let's see, let's go 30 pixels. That's not quite enough. We're going to blur it by a little more. Let's go ahead and blur it by 40. Okay, you can go ahead and click Select None. And now I'm just going to reduce the opacity on this yet, till we get a nice kind of pillow effect on the button. It adds more shading. So now we're actually getting pretty close to completion on the button. I think I'm going to go ahead and render our lens flares. So I'm going to make a new layer, and on this new layer I'm going to go ahead and fill it in completely with black. Then I'm going to go ahead and go Filters, Light and Shadow, Lens Flare. And I'm going to create a lens flare right in the middle. And as I explained in the Photoshop tutorial, we don't want any of these artifacts. So go ahead and select a lens flare right in the middle. And that will render. And then we're going to go ahead and set the layer mode on dodge. Now we're going to go color, desaturate. Click OK. And now we're going to grab the scale tool. And we're just going to scale this down about like that. And I'm also going to scale it to the side a little bit. And that's just because I don't want it to be quite so long. So now that we have this, we are going to grab this and move it in between the square and the top layer. Then we're going to duplicate this, and then move it in between the square and the bottom layer. And that is about good. The top one needs to be moved just a little bit higher yet. Oops. About like that. That is a pretty good looking button so far. I'm actually going to tone down the opacity on these things. I'm actually going to maybe put them on overlay. I think that'll look a little better. So now we're ready to put the text on the button, and of course the font's going to be the same. I'm going to use the Blade Runner font, and we're just going to type in the text button. And I believe this font is size 81, but any size, of course, will vary depending on your image size. So I'm actually going to make this text a little bit bigger just to fit the button. I think it's going to go up to almost 100. And this is looking pretty good, but we still need the pressed in effect on the button text. Now it's a little more tricky on Gimp, but it can still definitely be done. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the text tool, and instead of making this black, we're going to choose a nice dark gray. So we want it to be pretty dark gray. We don't want it to be that light, but we want to be able to distinguish black from gray fairly easily. So I'm going to zoom in for this next part, and I'm actually zooming out, but I'm actually going to zoom in. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and let's make the glow first. So we can go ahead and duplicate this layer, and then on the bottom layer, take the text tool and turn this into white. So now that we have this white text, we can go ahead and go Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And Gaussian Blur 40 is a little strong. Let's just try it at 20. And that's a little strong, but it'll suit our purposes just fine. So go ahead and tone down the opacity to, 50% or so. And then we're going to right-click on the top text layer and click Alpha to Selection. So this is the part where it gets a little tricky, but it's pretty simple still. We're just going to select a pure dark black color and get a fairly small fuzzy brush. Doesn't have to be that small, but about like this or so. And we're going to pretend that the light source is coming from here to here. So light source here, going down this way. So that means we need to shade according to the light source. So any part you think should have shading according to the light source, go ahead and start shading it. That's actually pretty bad. And that'll give you a sort of sunken in effect. So I think we need to shade about like this. And this shouldn't take too terribly long. I'm already almost done. And it's a pretty subtle effect, but you actually can notice it if you look for it. I don't know how clear it's going to be on the YouTube video, but we will see, I suppose. But the subtle effect really does make all the difference, in my opinion. So we can go ahead and click Select None, and just for comparison, here it is with the shadows off and on. So it gives it really a much better sunk-in effect, and that's the effect we're going for, of course. So let's go ahead and zoom out and see our button finished product. So that looks fairly similar to the one we did on Photoshop. And of course, if you played around with it a little, you could even get it to look more similar. And this is basically just a tutorial showing that what can be done on Photoshop can also be done on Gimp. So if you'd like to see more tutorials that can be done on either program, please go ahead and subscribe. And until then, until my next tutorial, which should be coming out in a few days, my name is Gimp Know How. Thanks for watching.